Unpacking Church, will you stand and worship with us tonight? Let's sing this out. He's coming on the cloud. He's coming on the cloud. Kings and kingdoms will bow down. And every chain will break as broken hearts declare his praise. For who can stop the Lord Almighty? Our God is the Lion of Judah. He's roaring with power and fighting our battles, and every knee will bow before him. Our God is the Lamb that was slain for the sins of the world. His blood breaks the chains, and every knee will bow before the Lion and the Lamb. Every knee will bow before him. Open up, so open up the gates, make way before the King of Kings. The God who comes to save is here to set the captives free. For who can stop the Lord Almighty? Our God is the Lion of Judah. He's roaring with power and fighting our battles, and every knee will bow before him. Our God is the Lamb that was slain, the sins of the world. His blood breaks the chains, and every knee will bow before the Lion and the Lamb. Every knee will bow before him. Every knee will bow before him. Sing it out. Who can stop? Who can stop the Lord Almighty? Who can stop the Lord Almighty? Who can stop the Lord Almighty? Who can stop the Lord? This is good news tonight. Who can stop the Lord Almighty? There is none. Who can stop the Lord Almighty? Who can stop the Lord Almighty? Who can stop the Lord? Our God is the Lion of Judah. He's roaring with power and fighting our battles, and every knee will bow before him. Our God is the Lamb that was slain for the sins of the world. His blood breaks the chains, and every knee will bow before the Lion and the Lamb. Oh, every knee will bow before him.
Hey everyone, good to see you for church today. Really glad that you are with us, and I'm excited. I believe God has some good things that he wants to do in our midst today from wherever you might be. I just want to encourage you to remember that as we sing songs, it's not just for singing. It's one of the ways we connect with God. It's one of the ways we reach out to him. It's one of the ways that we express our love and our need for a relationship with him. And as we receive a really solid message in just a little bit, it's one of those things where it's not about just feeling encouraged for the day ahead or wanting to have something to kind of give us a boost in the morning. The messages we receive from God's word are his direction for us. the way he guides us, the way he springs us forward into the way we live our lives, whether it's at work, at home, or whatever else you might be up to in your life. And so I hope you will come expecting to receive something from God today. We're really glad that you are with us. Hope that you will enjoy the rest of the service.
Often we say things and we tell you exactly how to apply it to your life, but I'm not going to do that this time. In 1 John 3, it says, what great love God has lavished on us, that he calls us children of God, that he calls us his children. And then later on, he says, perfect love drives out all fear. So we're going to sing a song. It might be new to some of you. It goes a bit like this. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. Sing when darkness tries to roll over my bones, when sorrow comes to steal the joy I own, when brokenness and pain is all I know, and I won't be shaken, no, I won't be shaken. Sing it out. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. Shame no longer has a place to hide. I am not a captive to the lies. I'm not afraid to leave my past behind. No, I won't be shaken. No, I won't be shaken. Yeah, my fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. There's power that can break off every chain. There's power that can empty out the grave. There's resurrection power that can save. There's power in your name. There's power in your name. There's power that can break off every chain. There's power that can empty out the grave. Yes, there is. There's resurrection power that can save. There's power in your name. There's power in your name. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. 'Cause my fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. Feel free to take a seat.
Hearing this, a man sitting at the table with Jesus exclaimed, "What a blessing it will be to attend a banquet in the kingdom of God." Jesus replied with this story. A man prepared a great feast and sent out many invitations. When the banquet was ready, he sent his servant to tell the guests, "Come, the banquet is ready." But they all began making excuses. One said, "I have just bought a field and must inspect it. Please excuse me." Another said, "I have just bought 5 pairs of oxen and I want to try them out. Please excuse me." Another said, "I now have a wife, so I can't come." The servant returned and told his master what they had said. His master was furious and said, "Go quickly into the streets and alleys of the town and invite the poor, the crippled, the blind, and the lame." After the servant had done this, he reported, "There is still room for more." So his master said, "Go out into the country lanes and behind the hedges and urge anyone you find to come, so that the house will be full. For none of those I first invited will get even the smallest taste of my banquet."
We are glad to have you here, whether you're watching online, whether you're Yarmouth Wesleyan, whether you're coastal, whether you're from the community, whether you're just scrolling through Facebook and kind of landed on this. We are glad to have you here. And as Dave said earlier, we really do believe God has a plan. We don't believe people just show up because there's nothing else to do. We're not trying to have you tune in or show up just because we have nothing else to do, and so we put this together. We believe God is going to do something, and so I'm excited to do week 2 of the Parables series. But before I do that, I need to ask a very important question. How many in the room or how many watching online, how many have you seen the movie Inception? Wah, wah, wah. All right. So here's the premise of the movie Inception, and you need to understand this before we do our parable. In 2010, Leonardo DiCaprio does this movie. He's kind of the star. There's a big cast, the whole ensemble. But they make this movie that there's no possible way I could explain to you over the course of the next 30 minutes. But in the next 1 minute, here's the deal. He is a thief, he is a crook, and he operates in your dreams. And so what happens is they go about these things, they try to make things happen, they try to rob, steal, they try to do their business, but they do it in the dream world by manipulating your thoughts and behaviors at the dream level. And so here's the part that you need to know about Inception is that on the back half of the movie, you have this thing where they go into one dream, a rainy day in Los Angeles, and they do their stuff in there, but that requires them to go into a second dream. They have figured out how to go from a dream into a deeper dream. You've had those nights, right? Where you're dreaming, you're like layers deep in your own dream, like, how did I get here? So they go into this hotel and more stuff happens in the second layer of the dream. But then they realize they need to go into a third layer of a dream, this fortified, mountainous hospital where they have to do a third thing. And then while they're up to stuff there, they have to come back out of the 3 layers of the dream by doing these things, which I won't spoil in case you want to watch it later. Or if you have your phone here, or if you're watching online, you can just pop your phone up, watch Netflix, and tune me out. But you have these people who are 3 layers deep and then have to come 3 layers back out again. And the end has this one of those great Christopher Nolan endings, which you can go watch later. But the reason I bring up Inception is because you have this moment in the movie where it's 1 layer deep, a second layer deep, and then a third layer deep. I came to the parable that we're about to talk to today with an oversimplified approach, only to find out we have an Inception level thing going on here where there's 3 layers to the story that's happening. Last week we said it's 1 parable, but it had kind of 3 movements in it. That's not this. This is the thing where Jesus is at a dinner party. When you go to Luke 14 and you listen to what was painted, you saw what's painted, and you read that passage, that's actually the third layer. There's actually two very important layers above it that lead us to get to this one moment in the painting. And so in Luke 14, Jesus is at this dinner party. And he gets in the dinner party, he's doing his thing. It is the Sabbath. That is an important thing to note, because on the Sabbath, he is going to be confronted with a decision: do I heal somebody in our midst? On the Sabbath, the Pharisees had very strict rules about how much work someone could do, and so healing got dangerously close to doing work. So Jesus walks into this dinner party on the Sabbath. They're all sitting around, and he spots this man. If you have your Bibles or phones, you can scroll through Luke 14 as I'm telling it to you. He spots a man with dropsy. Now, that's not something we're often familiar with, but it is a swelling of the soft tissues. And so often their arms and their legs would swell up. It was often from a heart or liver or kidney issues, or maybe just malnutrition as a whole. But this man has got dropsy. He's swelling and he looks very uncomfortable. And Jesus spots the man, but he also knows the crowd is watching him. So he goes over and he asks them, who of you wouldn't save your ox, save your child if they fell into a hole? And they don't answer him. He heals the man, sends him on his way. Then he stands there, and it says in the next section, he kind of scopes out the room in verse 7. He scans the room and realizes that the people in the room are kind of the higher class of society, people who belong at a dinner party. And all of a sudden he's putting some stuff together. And I wonder if it's at that moment Jesus was looking at who was there and seeing this one sick man in the middle of a high-minded gathering. Is it possible that they invited that guy to the party just to see what Jesus would do? Is it possible that they're baiting him to say, we're going to load this up, we're going to bring this guy in, Jesus is going to see him, and he's going to have to break the law. He's going to have to work on the Sabbath. And so that's what happens. So he looks around the room and realizing the room that he's in, and they're all fighting for positions of honor and positions of priority. And so we move into the second layer where Jesus has healed this guy. That is like the appetizer to the night. Jesus heals somebody, sends them on their way. Move into the layer 2, he scopes the room out and realizes that people are clamoring for positions of authority, power, and significance. So he does two things. He turns to the guests. He said, listen, when you show up to a party, don't fight for the best seat in the house. Because what's liable to happen is somebody more significant than you will show up later, which was commonplace. To show up later, and what's going to happen is the host is going to bring that person to the most significant seat, and here's what's going to happen there, buddy. They're going to ask you to stand up and move to the back of the room. So if you want to look foolish, take the most important seat and take your chances. But if somebody more important comes, they're going to bump you to the bottom. And then what he says is, how about this? When you show up in a room, when you show up at a party, go to the least important place and wait for somebody to bring you up to a position of honor. It is much better to be humble and go this way and be invited to the front than to overshoot your reach and go for the front and be sent to the back of the room. Pretty simple, eh? How we attend rooms with humility. And then he looks over at the host and he says, listen here, I like this party that you did. But how about next time you throw a party, you don't just invite your friends and your relatives and your rich friends. Because we all know what they're going to do. You're going to invite them over to a party. You're going to do all the obligatory things, and they're going to invite you over to their house for a party. You pay for supper this time. They'll pay for supper next time. You buy this round of coffee. They'll buy this round of coffee. And we just go back and forth, taking care of the people that we like to take care of. And he says, next time you throw a party, go and find some lame people and some cripples and some beggars and bring them to your party, which again implies to me that Jesus knows the other guy wasn't actually invited. Because on the surface level, it looks like they had somebody there, this man with dropsy. But when he says this, why don't you invite people who are sick, lame, and crippled, I believe he knows that that guy wasn't actually invited. He was a prop. So how about next time you throw a party, invite people who will never be able to return the favor. Now, at first glance, we might say to ourselves, like, that seems a bit extreme that you can't have a party, you can't have a barbecue in your yard, and you can't invite your friends. That's not what he's doing. He's just saying, of course you're going to do that. Of course you're going to invite the obvious people over once in a while. But how about from time to time you invite people, you bless people who you know full well will never be able to return the favor. It's not that they won't, it's that they can't. We're still tracking? And all of a sudden a guy, it says he's reclining at the table. I picture him like leaning back. You know when you've eaten too much, you've undone the belt like one loop? I picture he's done that. He's feasted. He's done his thing. He's just kind of reclining back. And he says to Jesus, won't it be good when we're all in heaven at the big banquet? And Jesus like looks at him and, what are you talking about? So now here's what something interesting happens, because he is saying, won't it be great when we all are there? And then the Luke writes, but Jesus said to him, implying he's not about to affirm the man, he's about to correct the man. Then he tells this parable of the great banquet that you just watched painted in front of you. He gives this parable of this idea of an earthly story with a heavenly reality. Don't forget what the parables are. It's a simple story to express a complex idea. So this man says, won't this all be great when we're all in heaven with you? I mean, we would all be there, right? Aren't we the kind of people who would be with you at your banquet? Like, that makes sense, right? He says, well, there was this man, and he had a house, and he was going to throw a big party. He provided all the stuff, and he put the full spread on. And he sent his servant out to go and invite all of the obvious attenders. Almost like he's saying, like you, buddy. And the servant goes out, and they invites them to the banquet, invites them over to the party, invites them to the house, and he bumps into people, and the one guy's like, well, I'd like to come, but I bought a field, and I'd like to go and inspect it. You're being blown off when someone says, well, I bought a patch of dirt, and that dirt is not going to inspect itself, so I'd love to come to your party, but there is that field, and I do need to walk around in it. So he's like, well, I got a field, and I got to go do my thing. And then the next guy's like, well, I bought these oxen. I bought a nice team of yoke of oxen, and I'm gonna go and take them out for a test drive. And then the third guy just stops trying. The third guy's like, well, I'd come to your party, but I have a wife. I guarantee you, beyond a shadow of a doubt, the Plaizier guarantee, the wife was not beside the man when he said that. I'd love to come and have fun tonight, but got the wife here. And so that guy's not even trying anymore. He's just like, well, I got married, and fun stops when you get married, so what are you going to do? The servant goes back to the master. He says, well, listen, man, I tried. I went and invited all of the obvious candidates to your party. And it says the master gets angry. It says he is angry. Go out there and bring in every broken and busted individual you can find. So he does. He brings in all the leftover people of the community, and they all come in, and the servant runs to the master and says, we got more space. There's more space at the table. Master says, well, go out to the highways, go out to the hedges, like literally shake the bushes. Bring them in from wherever you can find them. I want a full table. How interesting is it that it wasn't just enough to invite people, that the master said, we're going to have this meal. I'm going to put on this spread. I want my table full. And Jesus tells another parable and kind of drops the mic. We have these moments where these parables are opened up. They go layers deep. There's more things that we could ever cover in them. And yet when we look at them for a moment, God starts to stir in how we process them. So I said to you, I went to this parable with a really simplified view, and I found myself moving back and back and back. And one of the first things I thought as I went through this parable in Luke 14 is that there's this angle where what would Jesus do if he was in our gatherings? See, the parable starts that Jesus is at a dinner party. Jesus is at a gathering of people. And I've said to you before, and I'll say it again, it's incredible how many times there's a gathering of people and Jesus is in their midst. Jesus is drawn to people. Jesus is drawn to where the action is. Jesus is drawn to where all kinds of people would gather. And so as I'm reading this thing, I'm thinking, if Jesus came to our gathering where our people gathered, and he looked around and sized up the situation, what would he think? What would his word be to us? Or can I say it this way? What would be the parable he would say to us if he was sitting 3 rows from the back and stood up and said, I've been watching the proceedings. I want to tell you a story about your gathering. I thought, oh man, what would Jesus say? Because then what immediately flashed in my mind as I think about our church is I know people and you know people. You know those Facebook people, the keyboard warriors. They get on there and they're always ranting about how the church isn't what it ought to be. The church isn't doing what it shouldn't be doing. And the church just wants your money and they're not serving the poor. You know these people. Please don't be these people. But you know these people that are watching, and maybe you're watching right now and you're like, hey, that's me. And you're just mad all the time. And you've always got a rant, and you're always posting a photo about some TV evangelist who lives in a $7 million mansion in the States. And you're like, well, that's what preachers are all about. And I look at my house on Grand Street in Ryerson like, there ain't no $8 million mansions on Grand Street. And there's always somebody mad that the church isn't doing more. And they're like, see, Jesus would show up and tell you to stop being terrible Christians. That's what he would show up and tell you. So I paused for a few minutes, like, what would Jesus say at our church? And I'll be honest, and it's not because I'm delusional, that's only part of the reason. I think Jesus would be fairly pleased. I don't think Yarmouth or Coastal are perfect places of worship. They're not perfect church families. They don't have it all figured out. We don't have it all figured out. I've said to you before, we will make mistakes regularly and often. You'll be disappointed by something on a regular basis. But as I thought about our church, I was like, I like what our church is up to. I think generally speaking, people feel welcome at our church. Dave's team is doing the barbecue on Wednesdays, the community barbecue, and I stood at the road kind of pointing people and giving some basic instructions. And the amount of people that pulled in and said, can anybody come to this? And the answer was always, yes, of course, come and feast. And if you keep driving, food will just appear in your lap like manna from heaven. Just go ahead. And one lady's like, well, I was just driving up the street and I heard it on the radio that there's free food, and so I just followed my nose. Like, you're welcome here. And then we have things like CR going on Monday nights. And you'll hear of people showing up to CR saying, I don't know if I fit anywhere. Do I fit here? And they're finding a resounding yes. You fit, you belong, you come on in. And so I don't have any delusions that we're perfect or have it all figured out, but I was like, you know what? I think Jesus might just stand up in our church and say, well done. You're not perfect, but you're doing a pretty good job. And so I reclined at my desk like the dude in the parable. I was like, it's good to be me. And then God was like, yeah, about that. Read the parable again, bud. So I read it again. And then I realized the parable is not Jesus standing up at church with a story. He's standing up in our homes with a story. I was like, oh, I don't like this thought. I don't like where this is going. And then I felt the Lord press me and say, if I could encourage you about what your church is doing for your community, do you think I could say that too about your home on the corner of Grand and Ryerson? It's like, oh, no, I really don't like this thought. Like, let's go back to the things that I feel good about. And I felt the Lord press in on me and say, remember, this is a story about our homes, not about our places of worship. And then the Lord just kind of kept taking me on that journey where I felt the Lord leaning and saying, is your home, your personal property, as equally welcoming and diverse in company as that church you feel so great about? And immediately the answer was no. I started scrolling back through my mind of the people who have been on our deck, or we've broken bread together, we've shared coffee together. And I started going through the roster of people who are in my home, and I had to confess to the Lord that they are all people that I intrinsically like. Because that's what we do with our home. We bring people in that we like. We keep the people we don't like for Tim Hortons. We meet them there. Because that way you can sit up and say, well, this has been great, but I got to go. And I started feeling convicted that That what I do, and I can't say this for you, but what I do is I excuse what I'm not doing in my home because of what I'm doing at my church. I excuse myself for what I'm not doing personally for all the great things I'm doing corporately. And all of a sudden I realized I'm abdicating my responsibility as a disciple of Jesus, and I'm not leveraging my home, and I'm hiding behind the good work of our church. And God said, when do you think you're going to bring that good work from your church onto your own property? I thought, how about you leave me alone? Like, oh man. We have been blessed with various places to live, apartments, homes. Some of you have decks, some of you have water frontage, some of you have coffee, some of you have meals, some of you have time. And I realized how easy it is to excuse ourselves from our individual obligation and opportunity to mix up with the community because maybe our church is doing a pretty good job. It's easy to feel good about what we're doing here and maybe not even realize we should be doing it over here. That I ought not to celebrate what I do corporately if I'm not willing to do it personally. I was like, oh man, like I need to do better of how I use the home that God has given me. It's not my home. He blessed us with it. He gave us with it. And so anything that I'm excited about in the church, I ought to be excited about in my home. And anything I practice in the church, I ought to practice in my home. Now here's the thing. It's wildly inconvenient. It's painful. It's costly. It's sacrificial. I like the containment of doing it in a public place or in an office or when I can control the time. When I invite people into my home, I can't leave. I am held hostage in my own home as long as that person needs to be there. Now, here's the other thing I felt the Lord pressing in on me because I started to think about, well, what could I do with my home? How could I serve? How could I leverage it? And I noticed something that's interesting for a lot of Christians is we like serving the outsiders of the community as long as the outsiders of the community are the approved outsiders of the community. You tracking with me, or is that too many dreams too deep? We are okay getting together with those who are outside as long as those who are outside are approved by the community and those around. I don't know if you've noticed this, but things trend. Things get popular for a while. We stamp certain things as like, this is the thing we all should rally around, but not this. This is the thing we should rally around. This is the thing we should campaign. This is the thing we should all be about. But this thing over here is still a little ugly and gross, and maybe nobody should touch that one. Like, yeah, we should probably do some stuff with some drunkards, but the dude who raped somebody, that dude doesn't deserve it. And what we do is we separate these sins in our community and these issues in our community where these are the stamped and pre-approved people that good people should associate with. These people, nobody should, get all my S's together, nobody should associate. And so we are weirded out or fear of guilty by association. And I wonder what Jesus would do to our pre-approved categories. Because there's outsiders, and then there's outsiders. There's those who don't think they belong, and those who are told they don't belong. And what is the role of the church to step in the gap there? Is that we are to serve and to go shake the bushes to invite people to the banquet table. And if we wouldn't invite them to our home, should we invite them to our church? And then I started thinking about a little layer deeper. And the second thought I had as I read this parable and I started processing it is, how many times has God prepared a feast for me as a disciple and a child of Him? He lays out the banquet, He lays out the feast, and I settle for peanut butter sandwiches. He lays out a meal to be had, and I walk by and just skim off God's table. Because let's be honest, I've got a field to inspect. I've got some oxen to put to work. I'm busy. I got stuff to do. I don't have time to feast. I got to run. I got to hustle. Our culture loves hustling. And then when I don't have time to feast, I look at God and say, well, God, I've got this wife. So I don't have time to feast. I got this wife. And this wife brought kids into our home. I ain't got time for you, God. And what happens is God invites me to feast, and I settle for snacking. God puts steak and lobster on the table, and I find the cheese and crackers on the corner. Like, that will suffice. Something happens on our journey as disciples where when we first come into a relationship and when we first step into the kingdom, everything is so new. And there's nothing like new Christians to make mature Christians feel rotten. You talk to a new Christian, like, what'd you do today? Well, I read the entire New Testament. Oh, I read Our Daily Bread while I was preoccupied. I really put a lot of effort into that one. He talked to this new Christian, like, man, I invited like all my neighborhood to come to church because I'm just so excited about what God is doing. You're like, well, I went this month. It's like, how did this happen where when we come into this new relationship with God, we are so excited, we take in everything. We just consume and consume. We hoard and we feast off of all of God's blessings. And then 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road, we've got our collection of Bibles. We've got our Philip Yancey books on the shelf. We've been to our Bethmore Bible studies. We're like, we've done it. We've seen this. I get to preach and you're like, yeah, I know where you're going with this one, buddy. I've heard this before. Like, what are we doing? God has laid out this banquet feast for us as his children, and we just pick and skim. And I've been feeling him press into me lately, although I'm reluctant to listen to him, so I want to put that card on the table. I have been sensing from him for a while to say, draw nearer and deeper. And I'll be honest, as your pastor, my answer has been, I'm suffice to skim. Because my skimming is still pretty good. It's better than most. God's like, well, I want you to come in deeper. Like, well, I'm got that field and those oxen. I'm busy. I'm preaching for you, God. Isn't that enough? He's like, no, I want you to come deeper. Like, it's going to be inconvenient. It's going to be costly. He's like, but if you will step into obedience, obedience leads us to deeper intimacy. And there's so much more God has for us in relationship. There's so much more of him that we leave untouched. There's so much more to go to the depths and swim in the oceans of who God is, what his Holy Spirit can do for you and for me. We're like, well, that would like require me getting up a half hour early. Well, and what we do in our Christian life is we tell ourselves we know it could be better, but it could also be a whole lot worse. So let's not rock the boat and stay comfy in the middle. And God is saying to us, I have prepared a feast. And what I love about our God is that he is more faithful to prepare the feast than we are to sit down at the table and receive. But he keeps doing it. He keeps making a feast. He keeps preparing. He keeps laying it out there, and he's waiting for you and I to sit down and enjoy him. Not his blessings, him. We want peace to get through the next meeting. He wants peace for the week. We want to get through the next marital fight. He wants to turn our marriage upside down. We want a little. He wants a lot. We want freedom from the next temptation. He wants to set you free to live free indeed. So we want all these little nibbles just to get through the next crisis. It's amazing how many times I've had meetings with people who say, I'm up against the wall. I'm in this crisis of a moment. Pastor, I need to talk with you. I need you to pray with me. We do that. I never hear from them again. Do you know why? Because I do. The crisis ended. The crisis came to an end. And so it wasn't actually to sit down and to feast and have intimacy with the Lord. It was, I need the rabbit's foot to rub real quick so I can get out of this problem that I'm in. And if I get out of this problem, I'll leave the rabbit's foot in your office, Pastor, and I'll be back in a couple months. God's like, oh, but I've prepared a feast, and you're doing drive-through. Oh, I've laid this out for you. Come and enjoy and slow down. And then I had the third thought come to my mind where it's not just those who are on the journey with him that he lays a banquet out for. There's very much the banquet laid out for the people who don't yet believe, but he's inviting them into his home for the very first time. See, for me, I've already accepted his invitation, but I'm the guy in the corner just kind of plucking crackers and cheese off the side. But there are people, maybe in this room or maybe watching online, they've heard of God's goodness. They've heard that God wants to bless. They might have heard that God might be halfway decent. They just give him a try, but they stand outside the banquet assuming it's not for them. The banquet must be for the people who belong in church. The banquet must be for the people who were raised in church. Those people belong at God's table. I mean, I know what I've done. I know where I've been. I know who I did it with. I don't probably belong in church. And they're missing that part where the master says to the servant, go grab anybody and everybody who will receive. Because often the people who think they're deserving of being there don't see the banquet for what it is. And the people who have been forgiven of much love much. So he's like, go get everybody, bring them in for the first time. And what's interesting is he does not level off the seating arrangement. Like, let's get all the mature believers up here at the head. Let's get these people over here. Let's get these people down here. Let's get the CR people way at the back because, they got some habits, hurts, and hang-ups. Let's get them at the back corner. No, just go get them. Bring them in. And if there's space left over, bring more people in. Well, they've got some issues. Yeah, I know that. Bring all the busted people of the community in because I've prepared a feast and I want my table full of those who need it and those who will enjoy it. If there are those who will reject it, that's on them. Now, the issue sometimes, and maybe this is more for, you're probably not if you're in this room, but if you're watching online, the thought is, if I go to the banquet, do I have the right clothes? Like, the amount of times people have said, I don't think I belong in church. I don't think I look the part. Well, that's the point. Come on in. I don't know if I know the banquet etiquette. I haven't been in church in a really long time. I went to this church when I was a child because my parents made me go, or my grandparents took me and dropped me off. And, when dad stopped going, I stopped going too. I don't know if I know the etiquettes of church. I don't know if I belong at the banquet. And he's like, no. You'll look ridiculous, but come on in. You make the party more fun. Come on in. I love nothing more than when people come to the banquet and hear with sweat bullets coming down their forehead. They're my favorite people because I know how uncomfortable they are. And the minute I start preaching, it's only going to get worse. But they're welcome. And then there's the people who think if I go to the banquet, it's not only do I think that I might not belong, but there might be somebody at the banquet that I know, and they know me, and they know I don't belong. Pastor, we live in a small town. I've done some things. I know some people in your church. We used to run together. We used to do these things together. We used to fish together. We used to drive together. We've done some things. And if I show up there, I'm going to be a hypocrite. If I show up there, they're going to judge me for stepping into the banquet, a banquet that I don't belong in. And the servant is running around the community saying, you don't get it. Our master is so passionate about you being at his table because he knows he has blessings that you need. He has something that you need from him. Well, I don't know if I fit. You fit. How do I know if I fit? Because you're hungry for God. Step in. And I believe there are people in this room who are doing this thing, but know there's more. There's just that gnawing. It's like when you go through McDonald's and have a garbage hamburger, you're like, I long for a good hamburger. And I think there are people who are I'm flirting with the banquet, or I've even watched it online. I think I'm longing for more, but I don't think I fit. And there are some people who are I just want to jump in for the very first time, or I want to come back to church in a long time. Do I fit here? You fit here. It's not me saying you fit here. It's God through Jesus, through that parable, saying that he has prepared this incredible feast. And anybody and everybody is welcome to come and partake of it. Our God wants a full, robust, good old Thanksgiving dinner kind of table. So what we said last week, even if God's got 99 people at the banquet, but he's got room for 100, he wants that one more person to come and partake of his blessings. That is our good God. That's not the mantra of the Wesleyan Church. That's our good God. He just wants to bless his children, and we are the ones that resist. He extends, we hesitate. He extends again, and he extends again. So I'm going to leave the parable with you tonight. Maybe you're processing I do have a home. I do have an ability. I do have a gifting. I do have a wiring where I need to leverage that for my community's sake. Maybe for some of you, you're on the journey with the Lord, but full well that it's been a lot of spiritual peanut butter sandwiches. You've heard of the steak, you've seen the steak, you kind of want to try it, but you're hesitant. I'm telling you, the steak is worth it. Put the peanut butter sandwich down. And then some of you in this room or watching might be saying, I do want to step into a relationship with God. He is inviting you today.
Well, that was a great service and a really good message from AJ. We appreciate it a lot. And I just want to encourage you, don't let it just be something you listen to. Let it be something you keep processing with God about how you're going to act on it. A couple of things. Thank you for the ways you are continuing to be so generous with your giving. The easiest way to give, if you are not doing that yet and you would like to, is through e-transfer online. We've got a couple of email addresses for you to reach out to, and we would really appreciate that. Thank you for your generosity. A couple of other things. Tonight at 6:30 at Yarmouth Wesleyan, we've got a community memorial service. We know it's been hard to mourn together over the last few months. So if you have lost someone in your life recently, or you know of someone who attends this church, who will be attending, and you would like to just support them, 6:30, that's a really important, heartfelt time together where we just rally around each other and seek God's comfort and His hope as part of that. Also happening further down the line in Barrington, Coastal is relaunching tonight. 2 services that you need to register for online. 6 o'clock and 7:30, not at the high school, it's now at the Barrington Lions Hall. And so make sure you register for those services. There are still some spaces available, but they're filling up. They would love to see you. We would love to see you if you're going to be here in Yarmouth. All the same, we hope you have a great week, and we'll look forward to seeing you next Sunday.